The bitter wind howled through the gaps in the wooden shutters of Pine Ridge's only medical clinic, carrying with it the promise of another brutal night in the Colorado Territory. Dr. Eleanor Hart pulled her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders as she ground willow bark into powder by lamplight, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The winter of 1887 had been merciless, trapping the small mountain town under 3 feet of snow for weeks. A thunderous pounding on her door shattered the evening's quiet. Ellie's hand instinctively moved toward the small pistol she kept beneath her medical supplies, a necessity she'd learned the hard way after losing her family to ruthless men years ago. "Doc, open up! Man's bleeding bad!" Martha Winter's familiar voice carried through the door, urgent and breathless. Ellie quickly unlatched the heavy wooden barrier to find the hospice owner supporting a tall stranger whose dark shirt was soaked crimson across the shoulder. "Found him collapsed near the livery," Martha panted, her greying hair escaping its usual neat bun. "Rode in just before that last squall hit." The stranger raised his head, revealing piercing blue-grey eyes that seemed to hold years of pain. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and despite his obvious distress, there was something magnetic about his presence that made Ellie's pulse quicken and her defenses rise. "Can you help him, Ellie?" Martha's weathered face creased with worry. "Bring him to the examination table," Ellie commanded, her professional instincts overriding her personal reservations. She'd sworn an oath to heal, regardless of who needed her help. As they helped the man onto the table, he caught her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Name's Cole," he said through gritted teeth. "And I'm grateful, Doc." Something in his voice, a rough honesty beneath the pain, made her look into his eyes again. "Well, Cole, let's see what we're dealing with." She cut away his shirt to reveal a bullet wound that had torn through muscle but missed vital arteries. As she worked, cleaning and stitching by lamplight, she noticed his hands, calloused but steady, the hands of someone who'd lived hard but wasn't cruel. There were no rings, but there was a small scar across his knuckles that spoke of old fights. "You're not from around here," she observed, threading her needle. "No, ma'am. Been traveling north, looking for work." His answer was careful, measured. Martha hovered nearby, periodically glancing toward the window. "Weather's getting worse." "That wind sounds angry tonight." Cole winced as Ellie began stitching. "Storms should pass by morning, they usually do." "How would you know?" Ellie asked, not looking up from her work. "Been caught in enough of them." There was something in his tone that suggested he'd been running for a while. As she finished bandaging his shoulder, Martha suddenly stiffened. What was that? Through the howling wind came the unmistakable sound of multiple horses approaching, their hooves muffled by the snow, but still audible to trained ears. Cole's entire body tensed. "Doc, I need you to listen carefully. Some men might come looking for me tonight. If they do, you've never seen me." Ellie stepped back, her hand moving toward her hidden weapon. "What kind of trouble are you bringing to my town?" "The kind that follows a man trying to leave his past behind." "Aye." Cole struggled to sit up, his face pale from blood loss. "I won't let anyone hurt you because of me." The hoofbeats grew closer, accompanied by rough voices calling through the storm. Martha peered through a crack in the shutters, her face draining of color. 5 men, armed. They're stopping at every building. "There's a back room," Ellie said quickly, her medical training warring with her instinct for self-preservation. Something about Cole made her want to trust him, despite every lesson her tragic past had taught her. "No." Cole slid off the table, pressing his hand to his freshly bandaged wound. "If they find me here, they'll hurt you both. I won't have that on my conscience." Before either woman could protest, the front door exploded inward, splintering wood across the floor. 5 men in heavy coats pushed through, led by a man with greasy grey hair and cruel, mud-colored eyes. Ice crystals clung to their beards, and their weapons were drawn. "Well, well," the leader said, his voice like gravel. Serpent Kane's the name, ladies. Looking for an old friend of mine. Goes by Cole Reynolds these days. Martha stepped protectively in front of Ellie, but the older woman's courage couldn't hide her trembling. We don't know any— Now, Kane interrupted, his reptilian smile revealing yellowed teeth. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Cole's here. I can smell the blood and fear. Cole emerged from behind the examination screen, his jaw set with determination. Kane, should have known you'd track me down eventually. You cost me $50,000, boy. Money meant for my retirement. Kane's hand rested casually on his gun handle. Plus interest. I figure you owe me about $70,000 now. I stopped you from robbing an orphanage, Cole replied steadily. Children needed that money for food and medicine. Kane laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Always the hero, weren't you? Even when you rode with us, you had rules. His gaze shifted to Ellie, and his expression grew more predatory. Though I see you found yourself some new company. Ellie felt ice in her veins as Kane's attention focused on her. She'd seen that look before, the night her family died. Leave them out of this, Cole said, taking a step forward despite his wound. Your quarrel's with me. Oh, but Cole, Kane said, signaling his men to spread out through the small clinic. I think your lady friend here might be very useful. See, we've got some boys back at camp who could use a doctor's attention, and she's mighty pretty too. Over my dead body, Cole growled. That can be arranged. Kane drew his weapon with practiced ease. But first, I want my money, and I want to know where you've been hiding it. Ellie's mind raced. She'd been in situations like this before, men who took what they wanted through violence and intimidation. But something was different this time. Cole positioned himself between her and the guns, his own hand moving to his holster despite his obvious disadvantage. There is no money, Kane, Cole said. I gave what I took from that job to the families your gang orphaned. Every cent. Kane's face darkened. Then you'll work it off, starting with coming back to ride with us again. I'm done with that life. Nobody leaves Serpent Kane's gang. You know that. Kane cocked his pistol. But maybe watching your pretty doctor friend suffer will change your mind. Martha gasped as two of Kane's men moved toward Ellie. Cole tensed, preparing to fight despite being outnumbered and wounded. Wait, Ellie said suddenly. If you need medical attention, I can help, but not under threat. Kane studied her with those cold eyes. Smart woman, see, Cole? She understands negotiation. Dr. Hart helps people who deserve it, Martha said with more courage than Ellie expected. You don't qualify. One of Kane's men backhanded Martha, sending the older woman stumbling into a cabinet of medical supplies that crashed to the floor. Glass vials shattered, filling the air with the sharp scent of alcohol and medicinal herbs. Martha! Ellie rushed to help her friend, but Kane grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Now you're coming with us, Doc. Your boyfriend can follow if he wants to see you again. That's when Cole moved with a speed that surprised everyone. Despite his injury, he tackled the man holding Ellie, sending them both crashing into the examination table. His fist connected with the man's jaw before Kane's gun barrel pressed against his temple. Enough! Kane shouted. Boys, tie up the old woman. We're taking both the doctor and Cole. As Kane's men bound Martha's hands, Ellie felt a rage she hadn't experienced since the night her family was murdered. These men represented everything she'd dedicated her life to fighting against: cruelty, lawlessness, the strong preying on the weak. You don't have to do this, she said to Kane. I'll come willingly if you let Martha go. Kane's laugh was humorless. Oh, you'll come willingly anyway, sweetheart. Question is whether your friend here joins us alive or dead. A coal met her eyes across the room, and in that moment, Ellie saw something she'd never expected. A man genuinely more concerned for her safety than his own. It was the same look her father had given her mother during that terrible night years ago, the look of someone willing to die to protect what mattered most. Let's go, Kane ordered. Storm's getting worse, and I want to be back to camp before dawn." They were forced outside into the howling blizzard, where the wind cut through their clothes like frozen knives. Kane had brought extra horses, clearly planning this kidnapping in advance. Ellie was pushed onto a grey mare, while Cole was forced onto a black stallion, his hands bound behind his back. "Martha will freeze without heat," Ellie called over the wind. "Not my problem," Kane replied, mounting his own horse. "Move out." As they rode away from Pine Ridge, Ellie looked back to see lamplight flickering in the clinic windows. At least Martha was alive and could get help when the storm passed. The journey through the mountains was a nightmare of snow and ice. The horses struggled through drifts that reached their bellies, and the wind was so fierce that speaking required shouting. Ellie's medical bag had been secured to her saddle. Kane clearly intended to use her skills, but her fingers were growing numb despite her leather gloves. Cole rode beside her when the trail allowed, his face grim with pain and determination. Several times, she saw him testing the ropes binding his wrists, working to loosen them despite the cold, making the leather tighter. "You shouldn't have come," he called to her during a brief lull in the wind. "I didn't exactly have a choice," she replied. "I'll get you out of this." Something in his voice made her believe him. "Why should I trust you? I don't even know who you really are." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I was born James Reynolds, lost my parents to typhoid when I was 12, ended up on the streets, then fell in with Kane's gang because I needed to eat. But I never hurt innocent people, Ellie. Never. Then why are they after you?" "Because I finally grew a conscience. Kane planned to rob an orphanage outside Denver, kids who'd lost their parents to the same disease that took mine. I couldn't let it happen." Ellie studied his profile in the dim light reflecting off the snow. "So you stole from your own gang." "I prevented a robbery and made sure the money got where it was supposed to go. Kane sees it differently." They rode in silence for another hour, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Finally, Kane called a halt near a cluster of rocks that provided minimal shelter from the wind. "We'll wait here until this passes," he announced. "Can't see the trail anymore." His men built a small fire using dried wood they'd brought, and Ellie was allowed to sit near the flames to warm her hands. Cole remained mounted and bound, though she could see him shivering despite his attempts to hide it. "Your boyfriend's looking a little pale," Kane observed, settling down beside Ellie with a cup of coffee. "Bullet wounds don't heal well in cold weather." "Let me check his bandages," she said. "If infection sets in, he'll be no use to you." Kane considered this, then nodded to his men. "Bring him down, but keep him tied." As Ellie examined Cole's shoulder by firelight, she could feel the fever starting to burn through his skin. The wound was clean, but the cold and stress were taking their toll on his body. "He needs rest and warmth," she told Kane, "and those ropes are cutting off circulation to his hands." "He'll live," Kane replied dismissively. "Long enough to pay me back anyway." "What exactly do you want from him?" Ellie asked, using her professional voice to hide her growing concern for Cole. "Simple. He rejoins the gang, pulls jobs until he's earned back what he cost me, plus interest." Kane sipped his coffee. "Course, having a doctor along will be useful. Amazing how many hazards there are in our line of work." "I won't help you rob people." Kane's eyes glittered dangerously. "Oh, I think you will. See, Cole here seems mighty fond of you, and men do stupid things when they care about someone." Ellie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She'd seen this dynamic before, criminals using love as a weapon, turning people's best instincts against them. The storm finally began to ease near dawn, and Kane ordered them back on the horses. They rode for another 3 hours through a landscape transformed by snow into something alien and beautiful. Pine trees bent under the weight of white powder, and the morning sun created diamonds of light across the frozen wilderness. Finally, they reached Kane's camp, a collection of crude cabins hidden in a valley surrounded by tall peaks. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and Ellie could see other men moving between the buildings. It was a substantial operation, clearly established for the long term. "Welcome to my kingdom," Kane said with evident pride. "Been building this place for 5 years. Perfect location, impossible to find unless you know the way, and easy to defend." Ellie was taken to a sturdy cabin with bars on the windows, while Cole was dragged to what appeared to be a makeshift jail. As they separated them, their eyes met once more, and she saw him mouth the words, "Trust me." The cabin was actually comfortable, with a wood-burning stove and basic furniture. Kane clearly wanted to keep her healthy and cooperative. She was brought food and allowed to tend to her own needs, but the barred windows and locked door made her situation clear. That evening, Kane visited her personally. "I trust you're finding the accommodations acceptable." "What do you really want?" Ellie asked directly. "Smart woman. I like that." Kane settled into the room's only chair. "Truth is, we've got several boys hurt from our last job. Bank robbery went sideways, and we need proper medical care. You help them, and maybe your friend lives long enough to work off his debt." "And if I refuse?" Kane's smile was cold. "Well, Cole seems awful fond of you. Be a shame if something happened to such a pretty lady." Ellie had faced threats before, but something about Kane's casual cruelty reminded her too much of the men who'd killed her family. "I need to see my patients first. I can't treat people blindfolded." "Fair enough. Tomorrow morning you'll meet the boys who need your help. Tonight get some rest. You'll need it." After Kane left, Ellie examined her prison more carefully. The cabin was well built, with thick logs and secure fittings. But medical training had taught her to be observant, and she noticed that one of the window bars was slightly loose, not enough to escape through, but perhaps enough to pass messages. Late that night, she heard movement outside her window. A shadow passed by the loose bar, and she heard Cole's voice, barely a whisper. "Ellie, you there?" She pressed her face to the gap. "Cole, how did you get out?" "Haven't yet. Just loosened my ropes enough to move around the jail." "Listen carefully. Kane's planning something worse than he's told you." "What do you mean?" "There's no medical emergency. His men are fine. He wants you for something else entirely." Ellie felt ice in her stomach. "What?" "There's a town called Silver Creek, about 20 miles north. Rich mining families, isolated by the storm. Kane's planning to raid it, and he wants a doctor along to keep his men healthy during the job. That's not all, is it?" Cole's silence was answer enough. "Tell me," she whispered urgently. "He thinks having a hostage will make the townspeople cooperate. A lady doctor, specifically. Someone respectable they won't want to see hurt." Ellie closed her eyes, understanding dawning. "I'm not just his doctor. I'm his insurance policy. I won't let him do it, Ellie. I swear to you." "How? You're locked up too." "I've got a plan. But I need you to trust me, no matter what happens tomorrow." Before she could ask more questions, she heard footsteps approaching, and Cole melted back into the shadows. Ellie lay awake the rest of the night, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. Morning brought new snow and the sound of men preparing for travel. Ellie was given a breakfast of beans and coffee, then escorted to meet Kane's supposedly injured men. As Cole had predicted, they were all healthy, though they played at having various ailments when Kane was watching. "Seems like your boys are in fine shape," she told Kane pointedly. "Recovery is a miraculous thing," he replied with a grin. "Must be the mountain air." That afternoon, Kane gathered his gang for what was clearly a planning meeting. Ellie was kept in her cabin, but she could hear voices and the sounds of weapons being cleaned and horses being prepared. Just before sunset, Kane visited her again, this time with a different demeanor. Gone was the false friendliness, replaced by cold business. "We're riding out tonight," he announced. "You'll be coming with us." "Where?" "Silver Creek. Nice little town, lots of wealthy families. They'll be very motivated to cooperate when they see we've got their new doctor as our guest." Ellie's blood ran cold. "I'm not your hostage. You are now." Kane's hand rested on his gun. "And if you try anything heroic, remember that your boyfriend will pay the price." As if summoned by his words, two of Kane's men dragged Cole into the cabin. His face was bruised and his shirt was torn, but his eyes were alert and angry. "Ellie," he said, his voice rough, "are you hurt?" "I'm fine." She wanted to run to him, but Kane's presence kept her frozen in place. "Touching," Kane said mockingly. "Now, here's how this works. You both come with us to Silver Creek. The doctor keeps my men healthy and helps convince the townspeople to be generous with their valuables. Cole here makes sure she stays cooperative." "And after?" Cole asked. "After, we see how useful you both are in the long term." That night, as the gang prepared to ride, Ellie found herself mounted on the same grey mare, her hands bound to the saddle horn. Cole rode nearby, similarly restrained, his face grim with pain and determination. The ride to Silver Creek took most of the night through treacherous mountain passes, made even more dangerous by ice and fresh snow. Kane pushed them hard, clearly wanting to reach the town before dawn, when resistance would be minimal. As they approached the outskirts of Silver Creek, Ellie could see it was larger than Pine Ridge, with perhaps 200 residents. Lamplight flickered in windows, and smoke rose from dozens of chimneys. It looked peaceful, prosperous, and utterly unprepared for what was coming. Kane called a halt on a ridge overlooking the town. "Remember," he told his men, "we want cooperation, not carnage. Dead people don't hand over their valuables." "What about the sheriff?" one of his men asked. "Thompson's got that handled. Sheriff won't be a problem." Ellie realized with growing horror that this wasn't a spontaneous raid. Kane had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. He had inside information about the town's defenses and probably knew exactly which families had money worth stealing. As they rode down toward Silver Creek, Cole managed to maneuver his horse closer to hers. "When I make my move," he whispered urgently, "you run. Don't look back, don't try to help me, just get to safety. I'm not leaving you." "Ellie, listen to me. I've done terrible things in my life, but letting harm come to you won't be one of them." Before she could respond, Kane called for silence. They were approaching the first buildings of Silver Creek, and in the pre-dawn darkness, everything looked still and peaceful. That's when Kane's plan went wrong. A rifle shot echoed across the valley, followed immediately by shouts of alarm from the town. Lamplight blazed in windows as residents woke to the danger, and Ellie heard the unmistakable sound of men taking defensive positions. "They were expecting us," one of Kane's men said nervously. Kane's face was murderous. "Thompson double-crossed us. No matter. We'll take what we came for." The gang charged into Silver Creek with guns drawn, but instead of finding frightened civilians, they met organized resistance. The townspeople had clearly been warned and prepared. Barricades had been erected at key intersections, and men with rifles were positioned in upper windows. In the chaos of the initial exchange of gunfire, Cole's horse reared and threw him to the ground near a general store. Ellie watched in terror as he rolled behind a water trough, still bound and unable to defend himself properly. Kane grabbed her reins and forced her horse toward the center of town, where he began shouting demands. "People of Silver Creek, we've got your doctor here. Throw down your weapons or she dies." Ellie realized with sick clarity that she'd become the center of a deadly game. The townspeople couldn't risk her life, but surrendering to Kane would doom them all. That's when Cole appeared, somehow having freed himself from his bonds. He stepped into the street between Kane and the barricades, his hands raised but his stance ready for action. "Kane!" he called out. "Let's end this between you and me." Kane's attention snapped to him, and Ellie saw the madness in the outlaw's eyes. "You cost me everything, boy. Time to pay up." "Then take me," Cole said simply. "But let the doctor and these people go." The entire street seemed to hold its breath. Snow began to fall again, dusting the scene with white that seemed to muffle sound and make everything feel suspended in time. You think you can just walk away from what you did? Cain snarled, his gun trained on Cole. I think a man has to pay for his mistakes, Cole replied steadily, but innocent people shouldn't suffer for them. Cain laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Noble to the end, but you're forgetting something, Cole. I don't just want you dead. I want you to suffer first. That's when Cain made his fatal mistake. Instead of shooting Cole directly, he swung his gun toward Ellie. Take me instead, Cole shouted, diving forward just as Cain pulled the trigger. The bullet that was meant for Ellie caught Cole in the chest, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the frozen ground. In that moment, as she watched him fall, Ellie realized the truth that had been growing in her heart throughout their ordeal. She was falling in love with this damaged, noble man who'd risk everything to save her. But Cole's sacrifice had served its purpose. His action broke the standoff and gave the townspeople the opening they needed. Rifle fire erupted from the barricades, and Cain's gang found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire. Ellie slid from her horse and ran to Cole, pressing her hands to his chest wound as bullets flew around them. His eyes found hers, and she saw pain, but no regret. "Worth it," he whispered. "You're worth it." "Don't you dare die on me, James Reynolds," she said fiercely, using his real name as she worked to stop the bleeding. "I just figured out I love you, and I'll be damned if I let you leave me now." A smile crossed his pale lips. "Love you too, Doc. Ever since you stitched me up and didn't ask too many questions." The battle for Silver Creek lasted another 10 minutes, but the outcome was never in doubt once the townspeople had their opening. Cain's gang was outnumbered and outgunned by prepared defenders who were fighting for their homes and families. Cain himself tried to escape in the confusion, but a shot from one of the townspeople's rifles ended his reign of terror permanently. His body fell in the snow, and with it died the threat that had haunted Cole for so long. As dawn broke over Silver Creek, Ellie worked frantically to save Cole's life in the town's medical clinic. The bullet had missed his heart by inches, but he'd lost a dangerous amount of blood. For hours, she fought to stabilize him while the townspeople cleaned up the aftermath of the failed raid. 3 days later, Cole opened his eyes to find Ellie sleeping in a chair beside his bed, her hand resting on his arm. The morning sun streamed through clean windows, and for the first time in years, he felt truly free. "Ellie," he whispered. She woke instantly, her green eyes searching his face. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot," he said with a weak smile, "but alive." "Cain?" "Dead. His gang scattered or captured. It's over." Ellie's eyes filled with tears of relief. "I thought I'd lost you." Cole reached up with his uninjured arm to touch her face. "I meant what I said out there. You're worth everything to me." "Then don't ever try to sacrifice yourself for me again," she said firmly. "We face things together from now on." "Together?" "If you'll have me. I know you're trying to build a new life, and I'd like to be part of it." Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "I'm not a good man, Ellie. I've done things—" "You're a man trying to be better than his past," she interrupted. "That's all any of us can do. What about your practice, your life here?" Ellie smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Turns out Silver Creek needs a doctor, and I hear they're very grateful to the people who helped save their town." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we both found what we were looking for, James Reynolds. You found your redemption, and I found someone worth trusting with my heart." Outside their window, the Colorado winter was beginning to ease. The snow still fell, but it was gentler now, promising spring rather than threatening death. In a few months, the mountain passes would clear, and normal life would return to the high country. But for Cole and Ellie, normal life was just beginning. They'd both spent years running from their pasts, but they'd found something worth stopping for, each other, and a future built on the foundation of sacrifice, trust, and love that could survive even the harshest winter. The town of Silver Creek adopted them both, grateful for their role in defeating Kane's gang. Cole found work as a deputy sheriff, using his knowledge of criminal behavior to help protect the community he'd helped save. Ellie established a thriving medical practice, serving not just Silver Creek, but traveling to smaller communities throughout the territory. And when people asked them about the night of Kane's raid, they would remember how love had triumphed over hatred, how redemption was possible for even the most lost souls, and how sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the harshest ground. In the spring, when the snow melted and wildflowers began to bloom in the high meadows, James Reynolds married Dr. Eleanor Hart in a simple ceremony at the Silver Creek Church. The entire town attended, along with Martha Winters, who had traveled from Pine Ridge despite her age to see her dear friend find happiness. As they exchanged vows, both bride and groom remembered that moment in the snow when he'd shouted, "Take me instead," and she'd realized he would risk everything to save her. It had been the moment they'd both understood that some things were worth dying for, and even more worth living for. Their love story became legend in the Colorado Territory, told around campfires and in saloons, the tale of the outlaw who found redemption and the doctor who healed more than just his wounds. But for Cole and Ellie, it wasn't a story at all. It was simply the beginning of the life they'd both been searching for, forged in the crucible of a Colorado winter and tempered by the kind of love that comes once in a lifetime. Years later, when their own children would ask about how their parents met, Cole and Ellie would tell them about trust, about courage, about how people could change and grow and become better than their worst mistakes. And always they would remember that cold winter night when a desperate shout in the snow, "Take me instead," had changed everything and shown them both what it meant to love without reservation. In the end, they had saved each other. Not just from Kane's violence, but from the loneliness and regret that had haunted them both. Together, they built something beautiful in the wilderness, a love story written in snow and sealed with sacrifice, proving that even in the harshest winter, spring would always come again.